Anisa has always been the joy of her village. Her warm smile, kind eyes and tireless energy made her the center of attention at all celebrations and gatherings. The villagers loved her for her kindness and responsiveness, and the children were always drawn to her, knowing that she would tell them an interesting story or help with homework. She grew up in this village and never thought that one day her life could change so dramatically. When Anisa married Kamal, she was sure that she had made the right choice. Kamal seemed to her to be a reliable and caring man. He often repeated how much he loved her and said that they would build a strong family that would become an example for the whole village. But as time passed, a shadow began to hang over their marriage. Kamal, who was once full of ambition, began spending more and more time in local taverns, squandering money on gambling and drinking. Debts grew, and the family's life became more and more stressful. Anisa felt that something had changed. She noticed how Kamal began to avoid her gaze, how his hands trembled when he returned home late at night. She tried to talk to him, tried to find out what was bothering him, but he always waved her off, assuring her that everything was fine. But one day, when she found a threatening note from debt collectors in his pocket, she realized that their problems were much more serious than she thought. One evening, when the sun had already disappeared below the horizon and the house was dark, Kamal returned home later than usual. Anisa sat by the window, trying to guess what would happen next. She knew her husband was on edge, but she didn't know how much. When Kamal entered the house, his face was grey and his eyes were fixed on nothing.
Kamal, what happened? Why don't you tell me what's going on?
Kamal slowly looked up at his wife. There was something in his gaze that made her heart skip a beat. He sighed and ran his hand over his face.
Anisa, we need to talk. It's important.
She felt an uneasy feeling in her chest. He had never spoken in such a voice full of bitterness and fear before.
Something serious, right? You can trust me. We will manage together, no matter what happens.
Kamal looked away, as if he couldn't hold her gaze. He knew that what he was about to say would destroy her trust in him forever. But debts were piling up like a snowball, and the threat from creditors was becoming more and more real.
Anisa, I got into a lot of trouble. We have huge debts. I do not know how to pay them.
She tried to stay calm, but her voice was shaking.
We will find a way out. Maybe we can sell some of the property or ask the neighbors for help.
Kamal laughed nervously, as if her words were naive. He knew he had no time left. Deep down, he had already made a decision that burned him from the inside out.
It's not as easy as you think, Anisa. I've already considered all the options. And, damn it, the only way out is...
He paused, not daring to say what he was about to say. Anisa looked at him, not understanding what he was talking about. Her eyes were filled with hope, but at the same time with fear.
Kamal, what are you talking about? We can solve everything together, I'm sure.
He sighed heavily, as if his soul was so burdened with guilt that it was difficult for him to breathe.
I sold you, Anisa.
The words hung in the air like a heavy stone dropped into deep water. Anisa did not immediately understand what he said. Her mind refused to accept what she was hearing. She stood in front of him, her eyes wide with horror, and her mouth slightly opened, but did not utter a sound.
What? Did you say that?
Kamal looked at her, his eyes filled with despair.
I didn't want this, but I had no other choice. They threatened me, and I did. I sold you into slavery to pay off your debts.
His words hit her like a bolt from the blue. She couldn't believe that the man she loved and trusted could betray her in such a way. Her eyes filled with tears, but she tried to hold on.
How? How could you do that? I'm your wife, Kamal. We pledged our love and support to each other. And you're just sold me as a thing.
She tried to keep calm, but her voice was shaking with pain and disappointment. Kamal lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze.
I'm sorry, Anisa. I know it's terrible, but I didn't see any other way out. They threatened to kill me if I didn't pay the debt. I couldn't let them do that.
Tears flowed down Anisa's cheeks. Her heart was bursting with pain and horror at the realization that her life was now in the hands of cruel people she didn't even know.
You betrayed me, Kamal. You betrayed our love and our vows. I would never have thought that you would be capable of such a thing.
She turned to leave, but he grabbed her arm.
Please forgive me, Anisa. I will do everything to fix it. I'll find a way to get you back.
She pulled her hand away and took a step back.
No, you've already made your choice. And now I have to deal with its consequences.
With that, she turned around and left the house, her heart pounding and her mind overwhelmed by panic. She knew she needed to do something immediately, but she didn't know what exactly. Ahead of her was the unknown, full of danger and fear. She walked quickly through the village, her feet carrying her away from the place that had become a place of betrayal for her. People on the streets looked at her in surprise, but no one dared to ask what was going on. Anisa didn't notice anything around her. Her mind was focused on one thought: how to avoid the horror that awaited her. When she reached the outskirts of the village, she stopped to catch her breath. Her head was spinning with shock and fear. She knew that she had to run as far as possible to escape. She couldn't go home, couldn't trust anyone in the village. Her own husband had betrayed her. Now she could only rely on herself. Anisa decided to go deeper into the forest. She knew it could be dangerous there, but she had no other choice. She hoped that she would be able to hide and find shelter with one of her family's old friends who lived in another village beyond the forest. This thought gave her hope, and she began her journey. In the darkness of the forest, she was surrounded by the sounds of nocturnal animals, the rustling of leaves and the distant cry of birds. Every sound reminded her of her fragility and vulnerability. She knew that the people who bought her would not give up trying to find her, and she needed to be one step ahead. Thus began her long and dangerous journey to freedom. When Anisa was brought to the plantation, she was exhausted and devastated. On the day she was sold, she was taken away at night, tied up and taken to the slavers. The suddenness of the attack and the horror of what was happening left her in a daze. There was no time to say goodbye to my old life. Everything happened too fast. She ended up in a dirty hut with other women who were just as desperate as she was. The plantation was located in a remote area surrounded by dense jungle, which made escape almost impossible. Every day began before dawn and ended well after midnight. They had to work under the scorching sun, and the slightest disobedience was severely punished. The overseers spared no one. Their faces were cold and indifferent to the suffering of those who worked for them. Anisa quickly realized that her new world was a world of fear and cruelty. Her early days were filled with pain and despair. Her whole body ached, her fingers were bleeding, and her back ached from the endless blows of the whip. But the most terrible thing was the realization that her freedom had been stolen, and her former life was left far behind. At first, Anisa was too stunned to figure out what to do. But as soon as the shock began to subside, she realized that if she didn't start fighting, she would remain a prisoner. Despite all the horrors, she was determined to survive and find a way to escape. Every night, lying on a rough mat in the hut, she mentally told herself that she would not give up. She watched the overseers, memorizing their routes and habits. She needed to study everything to figure out the best way to get away unnoticed. One evening, when she was sent to the river to get water, she saw a woman sitting alone on a rock. The woman looked exhausted. Her face was covered with bruises, and her hands were shaking. She looked like she couldn't fight anymore. Anisa came closer, trying to make out her face. It was Khadija, one of the captives who had been brought with her.
Khadija, how are you?
Khadija raised her head, her eyes filled with despair and pain.
I can't take it anymore, Anisa. This life is not for man. They have made slaves of us, and we will die here.
Anisa felt anger boiling inside her. She knew she couldn't afford to despair. She needed something that could give her hope.
I know it's hard, but we can't give up. We have to find a way to get out of here.
Khadija laughed bitterly. Her laughter was full of pain.
Escape? There's no way out here, Anisa. They are watching our every move, and the jungle around this plantation is full of dangers. We won't be able to get far.
Anisa leaned towards Khadija, her voice low but confident.
I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if we don't do something, we'll die here like slaves. I'm not ready to give up, and neither should you.
These words seemed to cheer Khadija up a little. She looked at Anisa gratefully and nodded.
What do you suggest?
Anisa thought for a moment, her eyes burning with determination.
We have to start planning. We can't let fear control us. If we team up with others, then maybe we'll have a chance.
In the days that followed this conversation, Anisa began to quietly share her thoughts with other women. Some of them were so broken that they didn't even want to think about escaping, but others began to show interest. They knew the risk was huge, but living in fear and slavery was worse than risking everything for freedom. Anisa has become a real leader among the captives. She took the time to talk to each woman to find out who was willing to take the risk. They discussed various plans, assessed possible escape routes, and the time when it would be possible to leave unnoticed. One night, when the moon was shining especially brightly, Anisa gathered with the most reliable of the women to discuss their plans. They were sitting in the shade of a large palm tree, trying to speak as quietly as possible so as not to attract the attention of the overseers.
We have to be very careful. If we get caught, the consequences will be terrible.
The women nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation.
We have to wait for the right moment. When the rainy season starts, the overseers will become less attentive. The rains will make the ground muddy and slippery, and they won't be watching us so closely.
They knew that the rainy season was their only chance. The rains could become their allies, creating ideal conditions for escape. However, the rains also brought danger. The jungle became even more impassable, and rivers and streams overflowed, making the path to freedom even more dangerous. A few days later, new prisoners arrived at the plantation. Among them was a man named Kofi, who, as it turned out, knew the area and could help with planning an escape. He was strong and brave, and soon became an important part of Anisa's plan. They developed several routes that could be used to escape. One of them passed through the river, the other through dense thickets, where overseers rarely went. Each route had its own risks, and they discussed for a long time which one to choose. Kofi suggested walking through the thickets, as the river could become impassable during rains. Anisa agreed with him, but insisted that they have a backup plan if something goes wrong. The days passed slowly, and every night the women and Kofi gathered in secluded places to discuss the details of their escape. They prepared everything they could, including supplies of water and food, which they collected little by little, so as not to arouse suspicion. Finally, the day came when they decided to act. The sky was overcast, and heavy raindrops began to fall on the ground. This was their chance. Under the cover of the rain, they began their escape. They moved quietly and carefully, trying not to attract the attention of the overseers. Anisa was in front, her heart pounding with fear and excitement. They reached the thicket, and Kofi showed them the way through the dense vegetation. The whole group followed him, trying not to make a sound. Despite the rain and darkness, Anisa felt a surge of hope. She knew that their plan could fail at any moment, but she also knew that this was their only chance. They walked through the jungle, their feet sank into the mud, and their clothes stuck to their bodies. But despite all the difficulties, they continued to move forward, hoping for salvation. Suddenly, a noise was heard ahead. It was one of the overseers who was patrolling the area. The group froze, holding their breath. Anisa felt her heart pounding wildly in her chest. She knew that everything depended on this moment. Kofi motioned for everyone to sit down and stay put. They hid in the dense foliage, trying not to make a sound. The overseer passed by, not even suspecting the presence of the fugitives. As soon as he left, they continued on their way. It took several hours before they reached a safe place. Anisa knew that this was only the beginning of their journey to freedom, but she also knew that they had taken the first and most important step. They had risked everything for freedom, and now all they had to do was move on. Her heart was full of hope and determination. She knew there were new challenges ahead, but now they were ready for them. Anisa swore to herself that she would not stop until she had complete freedom, and her determination was unshakable. Anisa clenched her teeth and ran. The jungle stretched before her like an endless wall of greenery and shadow. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every step on the damp, slippery ground hurt my legs. She ran from the plantation for several hours, knowing that any moment of delay could cost her life. The rain had stopped, but the humidity was still unbearable, and the gloom under the canopy of trees was oppressive. Panting from exhaustion, she looked around, listening to the sounds of the forest. There were no pursuers in sight yet, but she knew they were somewhere nearby. The long months on the plantation had taught her to hide and wait, but this time it was different. She didn't have time to wait. If she is caught, the punishment will be severe. She may not return. Anisa continued on her way, trying not to slow down. She was making her way through the dense vegetation. Her body was covered with cuts and scratches from branches and thorns. The jungle seemed to breathe with her. Their rhythm was her rhythm. Their fear was her fear. But somewhere deep inside, she felt that the jungle was not her enemy. They were her ally, her refuge from the people who had made her a prisoner. Several hours had passed when Anisa heard the sound of water. The sounds of the running river gave her new hope. She moved towards the sound, and soon a small river opened up in front of her. Anisa fell to her knees and, scooping up water with her palms, drank greedily. The water was cool and refreshing. It seemed clean and free, like the kind of life Anisa longed for. She soon realized that the river could be her escape route. The water could hide her tracks and make it difficult to follow. Anisa began to move along the shore, carefully listening to every sound. Her heart was beating faster. She knew that every step could be decisive. A few hours later, she heard distant voices and the loud barking of dogs. The pursuers were closer than she thought. Terror gripped her heart, but she did not allow herself to panic. She threw herself into the river and began to cross to the other side. The cold water made her teeth chatter, but the fear of being caught was stronger than the cold. After crossing the river, Anisa disappeared into the dense thickets. She crawled on all fours, trying not to leave any footprints. Mud and leaves stuck to her body, but that was nothing compared to the danger of being caught. She heard the pursuers approaching, heard their screams, the barking of dogs, and prayed that they would not find her. After a few hours, the screams subsided. The pursuers seemed to have retreated or gone the other way. Anisa knew that this was only a temporary relief. She had to keep moving until she reached a safe place. It took several days before she came across a small village. Her body was scratched and scarred, and her clothes were in tatters. She knew she couldn't hope for help, but her fatigue and hunger made her desperate. She approached one of the huts and knocked. The door opened, and an old man with kind eyes appeared in front of her. He looked at her with surprise, but without fear.
Please help me. I need shelter and food. I escaped.
The old man looked at her carefully, his eyes full of understanding. He nodded and motioned for her to enter.
You're safe here, daughter. We won't give you away.
Anisa could barely keep from crying when she heard these words. She went inside, her legs wobbling with fatigue. The old man sat her down on a mat and brought her some food and water.
Where did you come from? How did you get here?
Anisa told him her story about her husband's betrayal, about the cruelty of the plantation, and about her desire for freedom. The old man listened in silence, without interrupting her. When she finished, he sighed and shook his head.
Here in the jungle, we often meet fugitives, but few reach us alive. You are a strong woman, Anisa, but you'll have to be even stronger if you want to survive.
He gave her shelter for a few days until she regained her strength. Every day she helped him with the housework, trying to earn her hospitality. Anisa felt grateful for his kindness and understood that her rescue was only the beginning of a long journey. Despite the temporary shelter and help, Anisa knew she couldn't stay in this village for too long. The slavers would look for her here sooner or later, and she didn't want to put these kind people in danger. She thanked the old man and his family for their kindness and prepared for the further journey. After leaving the village at dawn, Anisa headed further into the jungle. Her path was difficult and dangerous. She encountered wild animals, crossed fast-flowing rivers, and struggled with disease and exhaustion. But in every step she found a strength she didn't know she had. Every drop of sweat, every scar was proof of her determination and desire for freedom. One day, when her strength began to leave her, Anisa came across another small village. The villagers of this village also met her with caution, but after her story about how she escaped from slavery, they decided to help. They provided her with food and water, and one of the residents, a young man named Kai, offered to take her through the most dangerous part of the jungle. Kai was a hunter and knew the jungle like the back of his hand. He was silent, but his actions spoke more than words. He shared every drop of water and every piece of food with Anisa, encouraging her at moments when she almost lost hope. One night, when they lit a small fire to keep warm, Kai finally spoke.
You are very strong, Anisa. Not many people would be able to go that way.
Anisa looked at him through the flames, her eyes full of gratitude.
I have no other choice. I have to be strong to survive.
Kai nodded, his gaze full of respect.
You will find your freedom. I am sure of it. And you deserve it more than anyone.
Kai's words were like balm to Anisa's wound. She understood that her path to freedom was not over yet, but she felt that every day she was getting closer to her goal. After weeks of wandering, Anisa and Kai finally reached the edge of the jungle. In front of them was a road leading to the city, where, she was told, she could find a safe place and help. Anisa turned to Kai, her heart full of gratitude and appreciation.
Thank you, Kai. I couldn't have done it without you.
Kai smiled, his eyes glittering in the sun.
You are strong, Anisa. I just helped you see it.
They said goodbye, and Anisa set off, feeling that she had finally found herself. She knew there were new challenges ahead, but now she was ready for them. Her heart was full of hope and determination, and she knew that nothing would stop her on her way to freedom. After weeks of running through the jungle and searching for safety, Anisa finally reached the next village. Her body ached from fatigue, and the wounds from the journey were still bleeding. Her soul was tormented by anxiety and fear, but her determination did not leave her. She continued to move forward, knowing that she had to find a place where she could hide from her pursuers and find peace. The village she came to was small but cozy. Small huts built of clay and straw were located on the edges of a small market center. The villagers greeted her with curiosity and some caution, but when they found out that she had escaped from slavery, their expressions changed to sympathy and understanding. Anisa felt safe here, but she was still on her guard. She knew that she needed time to recover from her ordeal, and that she should be grateful for the hospitality of the locals. The villagers helped her with shelter and food, and the elder offered her help in restoring her strength. But most of all, Anisa remembered the man who approached her on the first day of her stay in the village. His name was Abel. Abel was known in the village for his kindness and bravery. Of medium height, with a strong build and soft, kind eyes, he immediately attracted Anisa's attention. He had a face full of wisdom and calmness, which inspired confidence. He invited her to stay in his hut until she felt better. Anisa, feeling in him the hope of salvation and support, gratefully accepted his offer. The days spent in his company turned into a time of peace and healing for Anisa. Abel, despite his busy schedule, devoted a lot of time to her. He brought her medicinal herbs and cooked food, which Anisa ate gratefully. Under his careful supervision, her wounds began to heal and her strength began to recover. He was patient and didn't ask unnecessary questions, realizing that she needed time to recover. There was no condemnation in his eyes, only support and a desire to help. Gradually, a friendship arose between them. Anisa felt more and more that she could trust this man. She began to tell Abel about her life before she was sold into slavery, about the pain and betrayal she had to go through. She shared her fears and doubts, and Abel listened to her attentively, without interrupting, sometimes only nodding, showing that he understood her feelings. He didn't give advice unless he was sure it would be useful. His presence filled her with calmness, and she realized that she felt safe with him. Abel, in turn, shared stories about his life with her. He grew up in this village and was known as a man of honor and valor. He talked about his parents, who instilled in him the values of honesty and justice, about his desire to help others and protect the weak. Abel talked a lot about his past, but never forgot to ask about her thoughts and feelings, always showing that her opinion was important to him. Anisa appreciated his attention and care, and their conversations became more than just an exchange of stories for her. Over time, she began to realize that her feelings for Abel were getting deeper. At first, she thought it was just gratitude for his help and support, but soon realized that something more was emerging in her heart. Every time he was around, her heart started beating faster. She could feel her face warming as he looked at her with his soft eyes. She knew that she was beginning to fall in love, and this feeling scared her, but at the same time brought joy. Abel also had tender feelings for her, but was afraid to talk about it, knowing what she had been through. He saw in her not only a beautiful and strong woman, but also a person who had experienced great grief and pain. He admired her fortitude and courage, her determination not to give up despite all the trials she had been through. He wanted to be there for her, to support her and protect her, but he was afraid that his feelings might hurt her or remind her of what she had lost. Gradually, their friendship began to grow into something more. They began to spend more time together, walking around the village, picking herbs, or just enjoying the sunset. Every moment spent together was filled with warmth and mutual understanding. They didn't need words to understand each other. Their silence spoke more than any words. On one of those days, when they were sitting under a tree watching the sunset, Anisa felt that she had to tell him what she felt. She was afraid that her confession might ruin everything, but she knew that she had to be honest with him and with herself. She gathered all her strength and opened her heart to him. Abel listened to her, his eyes shining with understanding and warmth. He felt her words touch his soul. He realized that their feelings were mutual, and it brought him relief. He took her hand, and Anisa felt the warmth of his touch spread throughout her body. She realized that, despite all her fears and doubts, she had found a man who sees her for real, without masks and covers. From that moment on, their relationship became even deeper. They no longer hid their feelings from each other and openly talked about their thoughts and experiences. Anisa felt that she had found in Abel what she had been looking for all her life: sincere love, support and understanding. He became her mainstay and her best friend, a man she could rely on in any situation. The villagers noticed the changes in their relationship and welcomed them with joy. They knew that Anisa had found in Abel not only support, but also the love that she had needed for so long. The village became her new home, a place where she could start a new life and be happy. She knew that there were still many challenges ahead of her, but with Abel by her side, she felt ready for any difficulties. Eventually, Abel suggested that she stay in the village forever and become his wife. Anisa, feeling that she had found her place and her man, gladly agreed. Their wedding was modest, but filled with love and warmth. On this day, the whole village celebrated with them, rejoicing for the new couple who found each other in the most difficult circumstances. Anisa realized that her path to freedom was not just an escape from slavery, but also a search for her real self. She found a love that was sincere and deep, based on respect and mutual understanding. Her life had changed forever, and now she was ready for a new stage, knowing that there was a man next to her who would always support and love her. Anisa and Abel enjoyed their new life in Abel's village, but Anisa knew that she could not truly find peace until she returned to her native village and confronted her past. Her ex-husband, Kamal, was still a shadow in her mind. He had betrayed her at the most difficult moment, and now she felt she had to tell the whole village the truth about what had happened. She wanted to restore her honor and dignity, which Kamal had tried to take away from her. Every day, the desire to return justice grew in her heart. Abel understood her desire and supported her in this decision. He knew that it would be a difficult path for her, but he also knew that she had to go through it in order to find real peace. He gathered his closest friends to help Anisa in this important matter. There were people in their group who shared their desire for justice and were ready to protect Anisa if necessary. Together they began planning a return to Anisa's native village. The plan was thought out to the smallest detail. They had to appear in the village unexpectedly so that no one could warn Kamal of their arrival. Anisa wanted to take him by surprise and make him answer for his actions in front of all the villagers. She understood that her words might cause shock and disbelief among some, but she believed that her story and the testimonies of those who helped her would be convincing enough. Before setting off, Anisa and Abel decided to visit the elder of their new village to receive his blessing. The elder, a wise and kind man who knew about their situation, wished them good luck and gave them a parting word. He understood that this step was important for Anisa and supported her decision to restore justice. The elder reminded them that the main thing is to maintain dignity and act within the law, despite the emotions that may arise in the process. On the appointed day, they set off. The journey to Anisa's native village was long and difficult, but she felt a surge of strength and confidence. Abel and his friends supported her, encouraging her and helping her overcome the difficulties of the path. They crossed rivers and forests, passing through mountains and valleys. The road was hard, but every step brought them closer to their goal. When they finally reached the borders of the village, Anisa felt her heart begin to beat faster. She was overcome by a mixture of emotions: fear, anger, determination. The memories of what happened here returned with renewed vigor, but she knew that she now had the strength to confront her past and protect herself. They entered the village in the early morning, when most of the residents were still in their homes. Anisa and her companions moved confidently, trying not to attract too much attention. They headed towards the central square, where the residents usually gathered. This place was not chosen by chance. Here, in the center of the village, Anisa wanted to tell her story so that everyone could hear it. When they reached the square, some residents began to leave their houses, noticing strangers. As the group moved forward, more and more people gathered around, wondering what was going on. When Anisa came to the center of the square, her heart was beating in her throat. But she felt the support of Abel and his friends, and it gave her courage. Finally, when enough people gathered in the square, Anisa began to speak. Her voice was weak at first, but as she told her story, it became more confident. She told about everything that happened: how her husband sold her into slavery to escape from debts, how she suffered on the plantation, and how she found the strength to escape and start as a newfie. She told about the help that kind people gave her, and how she met Abel, who became a support for her. Her words shocked the villagers. They knew Kamal as a calm and reliable person, and that he could commit such a betrayal seemed unthinkable to them. Some of them couldn't believe their ears, while others began to get angry at themselves for not noticing anything strange earlier. Anisa saw disbelief on some of the faces, but she also saw sympathy and support. When Anisa finished her story, silence reigned in the square. People stood in silence, processing what they had heard. Soon, some began to talk among themselves, discussing her words. Gradually, discontent with Kamal began to grow in the crowd. People who had once trusted him now felt betrayed and deceived. The atmosphere in the square was heating up. Meanwhile, Abel and his friends were closely monitoring the situation. They understood that Kamal, upon learning of Anisa's return, might try to hide or do something against them. Therefore, they sent several people around the village to find him and bring him to the square. After a while, one of them returned with the news that Kamal was hiding in his house and did not want to come out. The villagers, hearing this, were even more outraged. They started moving towards Kamal's house, demanding that he come out and answer for his actions. People were shouting for truth and justice. Anisa stood in the center of this crowd, watching what was happening, and felt her confidence grow. She knew that she was not alone now, that she had support, and that she would be able to achieve justice. When the crowd came to Kamal's house, he finally came out on the threshold. His face was pale, and his eyes betrayed fear. He saw people in front of him whom he had once known, and who were now against him. Kamal tried to justify himself, but his words were drowned out by the cries of the disgruntled residents. They wanted to know the truth and didn't want to listen to his excuses. The residents demanded that Kamal confess to what he had done and accept punishment for his betrayal. At that moment, Anisa stepped forward, feeling that she had to say the last word. She turned to Kamal, reminding him of all the years they had spent together and how his betrayal had ruined her life. She spoke firmly and calmly, and her words sounded like a sentence. Kamal, realizing that he no longer had support, bowed his head and confessed his crime. He knew that his betrayal would no longer remain a secret, and that he would have to answer for his actions. The villagers, upon hearing his confession, began to discuss what to do next. The elders of the village gathered together to decide Kamal's fate. They understood that his actions could not go unpunished, but they also understood that revenge would not solve all the problems. As a result, it was decided that Kamal would have to leave the village and never return. His property was to be sold, and the funds transferred to the community to restore justice. When the decision was announced, the villagers calmed down. They knew that justice had been restored, and that they could now move on. Anisa felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. She realized that despite all the difficulties she had to go through, she found the strength to return and restore her good name. Abel came up to her, hugged her, and said he was proud of her courage. Anisa realized that she was finally able to free herself from the past and start a new life. Now, with Abel by her side, she was ready for any challenges that might lie ahead. Together they left the village, knowing that their future would be bright and happy. After Kamal's expulsion from the village and the final exposure of his betrayal, Anisa's life begins to take on new outlines. Despite all the pain and suffering she has endured, her heart is filled with hope for a better future. People in the village who have learned the whole truth feel deep sympathy and respect for Anisa for her courage. She is welcomed back with open arms, and she once again feels part of the community she grew up in. The first few weeks after Anisa's return to the village were full of emotions and changes. Her relatives and friends surrounded her with care and support, helping her recover and regain her lost strength. They understood how difficult her journey had been and were ready to do everything possible to make her feel at home again. Anisa was touched by their attention and the love she felt at every step. Abel stayed by Anisa's side all this time, providing her not only with emotional support, but also helping her settle in the village. He understood that she needed time to recover from all her experiences and was willing to wait until she fully recovered. Abel became a support and a source of strength for her. His presence filled her life with new meaning. Gradually, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Anisa began to feel that her life was getting better. She became involved in the life of the village, helping her relatives and neighbors. As she had done before, her skills and knowledge became in demand again, and she was happy to share them with others. This allowed her to feel her importance and regain her self-confidence. Together with Abel, Anisa began to build a new life. They decided to settle in Abel's village, but often visited Anisa's native village, keeping in touch with her relatives and friends. They were warmly and kindly received in the new village, and they quickly became part of the local community. Abel, known for his courage and kindness, was respected in his village, and his residents were glad that he had such a wonderful life partner. Over time, their relationship with Abel grew stronger. They found joy in simple things, in morning walks in the fields, in working together on the land, in evening conversations around the campfire. Abel turned out to be an attentive and caring partner who was always ready to listen to Anisa and support her in difficult times. He helped her heal the wounds of the past, showing her that life can be filled with happiness and love if there is someone to share it with. Anisa found in Abel something she had never even dreamed of in her previous life: true love and a deep connection based on mutual understanding and respect. He not only admired her beauty, but also appreciated her inner peace, her strength and determination. Abel loved her for who she was, and this became the most valuable gift for Anisa. Every day in their new life was filled with meaning and joy. They worked together, creating comfort in their home, planting a vegetable garden and taking care of animals. Anisa took up traditional crafts which she was taught as a child, and even found the opportunity to teach young girls in the village. Her skills and knowledge were highly appreciated, and she felt needed and useful again. Abel, for his part, continued to do his work in the community, helping others and protecting the village from external threats. He was glad that Anisa was now with him, who supported him in all his endeavors and made his life more complete and happy. Their house became a place where villagers came for advice, support, or just to share the joy of spending time in pleasant company. Anisa and Abel often recalled how they met and rejoiced at how their lives turned out. Each of them realized that they had traveled a long and difficult path before they found their happiness. They thanked fate for bringing them together and never stopped appreciating every moment they spent with each other. They decided not to stop there and began to dream about the future. Anisa and Abel wanted to start a family, build another house where their children could live. They often discussed their plans for the future, dreaming about how they would raise their children, passing on to them the wisdom and traditions of their ancestors. Their dreams were simple, but no less valuable. Abel offered Anisa to teach him the crafts she was so good at. She gladly agreed, and they began to work together, creating things that became very popular in the village and beyond. Their wares were beautiful and practical, and they soon became famous outside their village. This brought them not only additional income, but also allowed them to strengthen their bond as they worked as a team. Gradually, Anisa began to feel that her past was receding, leaving room for new memories and joys. She knew she would never forget what had happened to her, but now it didn't hurt her. She realized that all the difficulties she had gone through had only strengthened her and helped her find true love and happiness. The villagers saw how happy Anisa and Abel were, and were happy for them. Their story has become a symbol of fortitude and faith in the best. People often came to them for advice or just to chat, and Anisa and Abel always greeted them with joy and an open heart. They have become true leaders of their community, inspiring others with their story and their example. Years later, when their children had already grown up and began to help them with the household, Anisa and Abel looked back at their lives with a sense of deep satisfaction and gratitude. They knew that their path was not easy, but every moment was worth it. They found in each other what they had been looking for all their lives: true love, support and understanding. Anisa, having gone through so many trials, found her happiness and knew that now her life was filled with meaning and joy. She was grateful to Abel for everything he had done for her, and every day she thanked fate for meeting him. Now she could look to the future with confidence and joy, knowing that there was a person next to her who would always support and love her. Abel and Anisa lived a long and happy life together, leaving behind a legacy of love and devotion. Their story inspired many and reminded them that true love and self-belief can overcome any difficulties and obstacles.